Hello friends, welcome to the learning series on the great scientists and technologists of the world. Today we are going to learn about Louis Braille, one of the most famous and renowned scientists of the 19th century. Kindly watch till the end to know the unknown areas of Louis Braille. Louis Braille was also a generous and caring person. He provided a new way for those who are blind or visually challenged to read and write. Louis had demonstrated that amazing things are possible if you have the drive. If you are new to the channel, kindly subscribe and click on the bell button to get our subsequent videos. Let's go into the video. It was a beautiful January 4, 1809 morning. Monique and Simon Braille gave birth to their fourth child in the little village of Coupvray. He was given the name Louis Braille. Simon was a leather worker, who supplied the other villagers with harnesses and other leather goods. Monique was a homemaker who raised her kids to be honest and hardworking. He developed rapidly into a bright-eyed child who investigated everything. The small, curious Louis ventured inside his father's tool shed when he was 3 years old. His mother was preoccupied with cooking, and his father was not home. Despite being cautioned about entering the tool shed, tiny Louis couldn't help but follow his curiosity. He found an awl in the tool shed and started to play with it. The leather was punctured with an awl, a sharp instrument. Louis's hand slipped as he was playing with the awl, causing him to poke one of his eyes by accident. When she heard him crying, Louis's mother came rushing into the shed. At first, she thought that the injury was not very serious, but as the days passed, the wound became infected. Then, to everyone's shock, the infection spread to the other eye, and poor little Louis Braille became blind. The first few months after becoming blind were very hard for little Louis. Louis was keen to learn, but there weren't many schools that served blind students. Fortunately for him, there was a new priest in town. Father Jacques Palouis was his name. Father Jacques at once saw the potential in young Louis and began to teach him. As the days went by, Louis learned to adapt to his disability and to lead a normal life. He went to school with all his friends and did well in his studies. He was both intelligent and creative. Louis showed that he had no intention of letting his disability slow him down one bit. Then one day, Father Jacques asked Louis if he would like to go to the Royal Institution for Blind Youth. Louis didn't have to think twice. He packed his bags and went off to find himself a solid education. Louis asked his teacher if the special school for the blind had any books that blind people could read when he first arrived. The teacher led him to the library, where she showed him 14 books created especially for young readers who are blind. Large letters lifted off the page in these books allowed blind youngsters to reach them and read the alphabet. The books themselves were massive and heavy because of how big the fonts were. Louis started to read all 14 books in the library. It took him a long time to read a phrase, even though he could feel every letter. Frequently, by the time he finished a sentence, he had almost forgotten what the beginning of the sentence was. Louis was convinced that there has to be a better way to read for the blind. Louis was already a talented musician. He had learned to play the organ and the cello when he was younger, and at the institute, Louis learned to play the piano. He was so good that he began to play at churches all over Paris. It also happened to be a steady source of income for Louis. One day, while he was at the institute, Louis heard that Captain Barbier was coming over to show them a new reading method that was called night writing. Barbier shared with the students his invention called night writing, which consisted of a code of 12 raised dots and dashes that let soldiers share top-secret information on the battlefield without even having to speak. Louis took the code and tried it out. He discovered that it was far better than reading the enormous volumes with the enormously raised letters. However, the army code remained sluggish and laborious. On a page, the dashes used a lot of space. There could only be 1 or 2 phrases on each page. Louis was aware that there was a method by which he could make this alphabet better. Louis took all his time working with different versions of Barbier's code at his next holiday house. Although Louis disliked the elevated dashes, he thought the raised dots were a good idea. Finally, by the time he was 15, Louis had trimmed Barbier's 12 dots into 6, ironed out the system, and removed the dashes. He then published the first ever Braille book in 1829. Louis continued to work on his new code. In 1837, he added symbols for math and music. When Louis suggested that Barbier to make some changes to his code, Barbier refused to listen. He did not want to take suggestions from a blind boy. The teachers in the school were also skeptical, so they refused to introduce Louis Braille's code. The students had to study Braille on their own. Louis continued to promote his new system of reading for the blind. He called it Braille, but never tried to claim all the glory for himself. He always told everyone that Captain Barbier had first invented the system. Despite the fact that Barbier fought Louis's system and tried to make his own method the official medium of instruction, at the age of 20, Louis was appointed as a teacher at his own school. Many other schools throughout the world started using Braille as the official language of instruction, despite his own school's refusal to do so. Double-sided pages in Braille books saved up a lot of space. In order to aid the blind in navigating public areas, Louis also created Braille signs. Louis had contracted TB in his youth. As Louis Braille grew older, his tuberculosis worsened until, on June 6, 1952, 2 days after turning 43, he passed away. After his death, his remains were sent back to the place of his birth, and later they were sent to Paris to be interred in the Pantheon. It was only after his death that his school, the Royal Institute, adopted the Braille system. Louis Braille was a deeply modest man who performed many acts of kindness and charity. Besides giving the world of visually impaired people a new method to read and write, Louis proved that if you have the motivation, you can do incredible things. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family.